Trump is calling it an assault on our country, telling USA Today that he will send as many troops to the border as necessary.
Democrats produce mobs. You have some very, very bad people in the Caravan. You have some very tough criminal elements within the Caravan. But I will seal off the border before they come into this country.
Pete, you served our country. What do you think?
Well, I served our country. I never served at the border. But I think in this particular case, it will be time to deploy the military. I believe so, because we haven't changed our immigration policy.
Your views on immigration will have zero impact and zero influence on a House dominated by Democrats who want to replace you, the American voters, with newly amnestied citizens and an ever-increasing number of chain migrants.
I'm speechless. This is a mob that's invading our country, and this needs to be stopped.
Let me just give you some perspective on that. The so-called national emergency, the Caravan, actually represents about 0.06% of all of the undocumented people already in this country. So we are talking about a very small fraction here. But the president is hoping he's got a winning strategy here, the same strategy that helped him win the White House. He's hoping can give Republicans a boost in this midterm. And that strategy is using immigration to stoke fears.
Welcome to the James Chambers Show. I'm your host for this podcast, James Chambers. This is just a little daily aside. I've been thinking a lot about this caravan of migrants coming up towards our southern border, and I really felt like I needed to talk about that briefly. So, this week has been full of just rhetoric and fire and fury about the caravan of asylum seekers coming up from the South, from South and Central America. And at this point, they're heading up to the border. They're about 7,000-ish people strong. So you can well imagine there have been heated discussions and finger pointing from all sides of the social and political spectrum about what to do with these people. There have been calls to send the U.S. military down to secure the border, which, by the way, is illegal under the Capaz Comitatus Act. Yeah, they can add support, they can help transportation, they can train, but they cannot act as law enforcement. The military cannot act as law enforcement. That is illegal. Just throwing that out there. So, but that being said, temperatures are definitely rising, and no one seems to be offering a real solution to this mass migration of Latin people. And there's two prominent issues here. One, these people are attempting to come here legally. Yeah, that's right. They are seeking asylum due to the harsh conditions in life in many of the poor communities in Latin America. The asylum system goes back all the way to 1948 from the UN, and our formal asylum system was established in 1980. This is a quote from PBS. Under federal law, anyone from another country can seek asylum and therefore entry into the U.S. by claiming to have fled their countries out of fear of persecution over race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership of a particular social group. Immigrants are eligible to apply for asylum up to 1 year after their entry into the U.S. and can apply whether or not they entered the country legally or illegally. Immigrants who have been in this country longer than a year can actually apply for asylum status if they meet certain criteria. This is according to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is an agency of the Department of Homeland Security. More recently, asylum seekers have also been granted status due to their gender and sexual orientation. To apply for asylum, applicants are required to file a Form I-589, which is a 12-page document in which they must describe the harm that they face in their country in detail. And then asylum seekers, often with the help of attorneys, have to collect information such as personal statements and letters from other people, medical reports and photographs, all in essence to support their case. So look, in other words, gaining asylum is not easy. It is, however, legal. And anyone from another country can ask for it. So let's be clear. If anyone says that these people are coming, to rush the border and they're an invasion or they're a mob, that's just a lie. Remind them that these migrants are attempting to come here legally, and now it's our turn to follow our own laws. If we simply turn them away or close all the ports of entry, we are breaking U.S. federal law and international law as established by the UN that we agreed to uphold. So part number two, America is in some measure directly to blame for the unrest in many Latin countries. It sucks, but it's true. Here's just a little brief overview of some of the horrible mishandlings of our Southern foreign policy. In 1823, the Monroe Doctrine stated that Latin America was within the United States, quote, sphere of influence, and that European powers were no longer allowed to colonize or interfere with the affairs of that region. We simply decided that it was justified for the U.S. to simply intervene and impose its will on, quote, America's backyard, and made foreign intervention acceptable, so long as it was the United States doing the intervening. In 1904 was the big stick ideology. President Roosevelt used the Monroe Doctrine as the, quote, justification for the interventions in Central America and the Caribbean and the creation of a series of semi-protectorates. So we claimed Latin America and the Caribbean as protectorates. The Mexican-American War is another example, which basically just resulted from James Polk believing that our nation had a, quote, manifest destiny, and we're supposed to, by God, expand our borders all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So we went to war and took 1/3 of Mexico's land. Then we get into regime change. And we've done this before in so many countries, but here's a couple of items what we've done in Central and South America. Here you go. The Mexican Revolution. The revolution began as an attempt to overthrow authoritarian presidents, and forgive me if I mispronounce this, but it's President Porfirio Diaz, which this whole revolution devolved into a bloody, horrifying conflict with an estimated 1 million casualties. America decided that General Victoriano Huerta would be a better fit for Mexico and better for American-Mexican relations. So Henry Lane Wilson, who's the U.S. ambassador to Mexico at the time, personally helped the general's rise to power in that region, and Huerta proved to be even worse than Diaz. He was a harsher authoritarian than the person that we helped kick out of power. All right? And he is now considered to be one of history's worst villains in Mexico. This is a man that we directly supported into power in Mexico. In Chile, the Chilean coup. The Chilean Air Force bombed La Moneda and the presidential palace in Santiago, while the democratically elected socialist president Salvador Allende and the conservative Congress of Chile were both overthrown. This ushered in a 17-year dictatorship under the U.S.-backed Augusto Pinochet, who was the head of the Chilean army. Again, we supported a military coup for somebody who was democratically, to overthrow somebody who was democratically elected in these countries. We helped establish these authoritarian dictatorships in several Latin countries, and then we act bewildered that the people are suffering and dying. Well, it's not our problem. Why should America have to solve all the world's problems? Well, we helped create the atrocities. And then to top it all off, when people from Mexico or Central America or South America, when they come here to get asylum, their families are separated, and they're locked into a legal battle that can literally take years to process. And there's no guarantee that they're going to be allowed to stay at the end of all that. And Jesus, I didn't even touch on some of the horrible things that NAFTA and the war on drugs has done in these countries too. You know, look, can we take every refugee? Probably not. Can we take every asylum seeker? Well, again, probably not. It's entirely possible that there are people in this caravan that are really only coming to hitch a ride so that they can get through the system a little more quickly and gain entry into the U.S. with some kind of legal status. But guess what? There's no evidence, none, that any of these people are terrorists or they're Middle Easterners or bad hombres, as the president is claiming in his campaign rallies. He even admitted that he had no actual evidence to support those claims. In other words, he is lying. So let's get real. No one is asking the U.S. to take in all of the world's refugees. No one is demanding that we take all of the world's poor. Those are straw man arguments, and just call them out for what they are. countries that border other less wealthy or less stable countries have a responsibility to render aid and comfort to their neighbors when possible. That strengthens your relationships and it creates stability in that area of the world. So what does that look like? Well, Canada and Mexico are our direct neighbors. I mean, they literally live in the house next door to us on either side. If you want to live a happy life, you have to have, at the very least, a basic level of civility with your neighbors. Central and South America are just 2 doors down on the planetary block. We claimed them as semi-protectorates, remember? Since 1823, we have been exerting our influence and wants onto Latin America. We covered those nations in a blanket of big stick nationalism, and we did some pretty bad things in the process. America has an ethical obligation to render aid to our friends in the South. Why? Because while we have at times been helpful to those nations, America has abdicated its responsibility to protect those people in our sphere of influence. We can't solve the world's problems, and we're not responsible to do that. But we have an obligation to help our neighbors that we have abused in the past. And that's my thought for today. Thank you for listening to The James Chambers Show. There will be more episodes coming shortly. If you want to contact the show, just leave a comment in the comment section below. I would greatly appreciate it. Or you can email the show at realjcshow2017@gmail.com. That's realjcshow2017@gmail.com or at realjcshow on Twitter. Feel free to contact me anytime. It's always great to hear from you. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time.